You know, sometimes late at night when the world gets quiet, I catch myself wondering where we really come from, not just in a scientific way, atoms, DNA, evolution, but in that quiet, aching way the heart asks when it feels lost. Have you ever had that feeling too? That small voice inside whispering, "What am I really doing here?" Maybe that's why you found this video. And before we begin, if you're someone who enjoys quiet moments like this, where we slow down, breathe, and look a little deeper into life, maybe consider subscribing to this channel. You'll find stories here that don't try to teach you what to think, but simply invite you to feel, to remember, and to come home to yourself. Now, let's just sit together for a bit and talk about where humans come from, through the eyes of the Buddha. But don't worry, this isn't going to be a lecture about religion or philosophy. Think of it more like sitting with an old friend under a soft evening sky, talking about the mystery of life. You see, while many traditions and beliefs try to explain exactly how everything began, the Buddha offered something very different. He didn't give a clear, fixed story about creation, because he knew that the point wasn't to find a perfect answer. It was to understand ourselves. Maybe that's what makes his ways so human, so kind. There's an old story that the Buddha once told about a man who was shot with a poisoned arrow. The man refused to let anyone remove it until he knew who shot it, what kind of bow was used, and where the arrow came from. The Buddha smiled and said that by the time he found those answers, he'd already be gone. And that's how he saw questions about the beginning of the world. They're fascinating, yes, but if we spend our lives only chasing cosmic explanations, we miss the one thing that truly matters: how we live, how we love, and how we find peace right here and now. Maybe the truth is simpler, and at the same time, deeper than we think. The Buddha said that trying to find the very first beginning of the universe is like trying to find the first ripple in an endless sea. There isn't one. The waves rise and fall, life appears and disappears, and all of it keeps moving in circles, just like the seasons, just like the breath you're taking right now. There's something strangely comforting in that, don't you think? It means we are part of a rhythm much larger than our stories, our fears, even our lives. When I first heard that idea, it made me pause. A universe without a beginning? How do you even wrap your mind around that? But maybe you don't. Maybe you just feel it. Think about it. Everything changes. Everything returns. Everything flows. The sun rises, then sets. A leaf grows, falls, and becomes part of the soil that feeds the next leaf. We are not separate from that pattern. We are that pattern. The Buddha's teachings remind us that we don't have to know the start of the story to understand our place in it. And maybe that's where freedom begins. When we stop obsessing over where did it all begin and start asking, how can I be awake to it now? The Buddha never said, don't be curious. He just said, be curious in a way that helps you wake up. He knew that we often look for grand answers because we're trying to fill a quiet emptiness inside. But when we learn to rest in the mystery instead of fighting it, something softens. The noise fades. We begin to notice beauty again. The way light dances on the water, the way breath moves in and out like a tide. Maybe that's where understanding really begins. So, if we ask again, where do humans come from? Maybe the most honest answer is in a timeline, but a truth. We come from everything, and everything comes from us. We're born out of the same cycles that move the stars and stir the oceans. And maybe the purpose of knowing that isn't to make us feel small, but to remind us we belong to this earth, to each other, to the quiet unfolding of life itself. If you're still here, thank you for listening this far. I know these kind of reflections aren't flashy or fast, but they matter They remind us that the questions that have no answers are sometimes the ones that bring us closest to peace. And if you'd like to keep walking through reflections like this, gently, one breath at a time, stay with me, subscribe, and let's keep exploring the mystery together. Because maybe we'll never find where it all began, but maybe that's okay. Maybe the beauty isn't in knowing the first moment. It's in being fully present for this one. You know, when I was younger, I used to think that if I could just figure out where we came from, everything would make sense. Like somehow, knowing our origin would tell me why people suffer, why we love, why we hurt each other, why we keep searching. But the older I get, the more I realize it's not the beginning that gives meaning to life. It's what we do with the time in between. Maybe that's what the Buddha was pointing to when he spoke about the endless chain of causes and conditions. He said that life doesn't start from one single point. It unfolds moment by moment like links in a chain. Every thought, every action, every heartbeat is connected to what came before and what will come after. There's no first cause, no single moment when everything began. There's just this infinite web of moments, always flowing, always changing. Sometimes that idea feels too big for the mind to hold. But maybe it's not meant for the mind. Maybe it's meant for the heart. Because when we realize we're part of something that never really began and never truly ends, there's a strange kind of peace in that. We don't have to figure it all out. We just have to show up for this breath, this smile, this quiet second. Maybe that's what it means to be alive in the truest sense. The Buddha once said that life is like a flame passing from one candle to another. It's not the same flame, but it's not different either. The fire continues, even as the candles change. And that's how human existence moves, through time, through bodies, through hearts. We are not the first, and we won't be the last. But in this moment, right here, we carry the same light that's been burning since the beginning of time. Think about that. Every kindness you share, every gentle thought, every bit of love you give, it's part of that same flame. It's been passed down through countless lives, countless generations. The way a mother comforts her child, the way a stranger offers a smile on a hard day, the way we keep hoping even when things fall apart. All of it comes from that ancient fire that never truly goes out. Isn't that beautiful? It means you're part of something eternal, something sacred, without ever needing to call it divine. So maybe the question isn't, where do humans come from? Maybe it's, how do we continue? And the answer might be simpler than we think. We continue through each other, through our compassion, through our mistakes, through the courage to keep going. The Buddha saw that all beings rise and fall in this endless ocean of life, not as isolated waves, but as parts of the same water. When one wave rises, another follows. When one falls, another begins. Nothing is ever truly lost. It just changes form. Maybe that's why he spoke of rebirth not as a punishment or a promise, but as a natural rhythm. When we live with greed, anger, and ignorance, we create cycles of pain. But when we live with awareness, kindness, and understanding, we begin to soften those cycles. We begin to wake up. You don't have to believe in heaven or reincarnation to feel that truth. You can see it every day. When someone hurts you and you choose forgiveness instead of resentment, that's a kind of rebirth. When you lose something and still find gratitude, that's another. Each time you choose love over fear, you break an old pattern and start a new one. And maybe that's what the Buddha was really teaching. Not that we come from some grand beginning, but that we are always becoming. Every day, every breath, we are shaping what comes next. You don't have to be perfect to do that. You just have to be awake. So, If this speaks to something quiet in you, stay a little longer. Maybe hit that subscribe button, not for the numbers, but because this space is here for you, for anyone who's searching, wondering, and learning to breathe through the mystery. Because maybe we'll never know where we truly come from, but together we can learn how to live like we belong, right here, right now. You know, sometimes when I sit quietly and watch the world, the way light filters through the trees, the way the wind carries leaves across the ground, I start to feel something I can't quite explain. It's like a whisper saying, "You've been here before," not in this exact place, not in this body, but in this feeling of being alive, of being part of something vast and familiar. And maybe that's what the Buddha meant when he spoke of our endless journey through existence. Not a straight line from birth to death, but a circle, a gentle turning, where beginnings and endings are just different doors of the same home. He taught that what we call a person isn't something solid or fixed. It's more like a flame that flickers, always changing, shaped by the air around it. Our thoughts, our actions, our emotions, they're all conditions that shape the next moment, the next breath, the next life. Maybe that sounds mysterious, but if you really think about it, it's happening all the time. Who you were 5 years ago isn't who you are now. Even yesterday's version of you feels a little different, doesn't it? The things you've learned, the love you've lost, the quiet nights you survived, they've all changed you. You're being reborn every day, even without realizing it. Maybe that's the beauty of it. We don't have to wait for another lifetime to begin again. Each moment offers that chance. The Buddha said that nothing truly dies. It only transforms. Energy turns to energy. Thought turns to action. Love turns to memory. And memory becomes a seed for something new. Just like rain becomes a river and a river becomes the ocean, we too keep flowing, endlessly returning, endlessly renewed. When I think of it that way, it takes away some of the fear of endings, of saying goodbye, of watching time slip through our hands. Because maybe nothing is really lost. Maybe everything we've ever loved, every laugh, every tear, every person who's touched our life, keeps living through us in quiet, unseen ways. You can feel it sometimes, can't you? That sudden warmth in your heart when you remember someone who's gone. That strange peace that washes over you when you look at the stars and feel like you're not alone. Maybe that's life speaking back to you, reminding you that we're all connected in ways words can't fully describe. The Buddha's view wasn't about explaining the mystery away. It was about learning to live inside it. He wanted us to see that we're not isolated travelers on a lonely road. We're threads in a vast, woven pattern, moving together, touching everything, touched by everything. Every act of kindness ripples out. Every harsh word leaves a mark. Every choice, no matter how small, creates the next moment's world. That's why understanding where we come from isn't just about the past. It's about responsibility. Because the same chain of causes and effects that gave rise to us continues through us. What we think, what we say, what we do, it all becomes part of what the world will be. Maybe that's the real meaning of being human. Not just to ask where we came from, but to live in a way that brings peace to where we are. And maybe in the end, that's all the Buddha was asking us to do. To live gently, to be kind, even when it's hard, to forgive, even when it feels impossible. Because every gentle act you offer is a thread of light added to the endless fabric of life. It's your way of saying to the universe, I understand now. I may not know where I began, but I know how I want to continue. If that thought brings you a little calm, then maybe stay close. Subscribe if you'd like to keep walking this path together, slowly, softly, like two travelers sharing the same quiet road. Because in the end, Maybe that's what we're all looking for. Not answers, but connection. Not certainty, but peace. And if we can find even a moment of that, maybe that's already enough. There's something deeply human about wanting to know where we come from, isn't there? We look up at the stars and feel that quiet tug, that sense that there must be more to our story. But the Buddha gently turned that question around. He didn't say, "Don't wonder." He just asked, "While you're wondering, are you awake to the life that's happening right now?" Maybe that's the heart of it, not to escape the mystery, but to wake up inside it. He spoke of dependent origination, a phrase that sounds complicated, but at its heart, it's beautifully simple. Everything arises because something else allows it to. Nothing stands alone. A flower blooms because of sunlight, water, and soil. The rain falls because of clouds. The clouds form because of the sea. And the sea exists because of the earth beneath it. In that same way, we exist because of countless conditions. Our parents, their parents, the food that nourished us, the air that fills our lungs, even the kindness of strangers who crossed our path. When you start to see that, you realize there's no single starting point. We come from everything. And maybe that realization softens something inside us, because it means we're never really separate. The loneliness that so many of us feel, it begins to fade when we see that we're part of this vast, interconnected dance of life. Every breath you take is shared with the trees. Every meal you eat comes from the patience of the earth. Even your laughter and your pain, they belong to the same fabric that holds every living thing. When the Buddha saw this truth, he didn't find distance. He found compassion. Because how could you harm another when you see that the other is, in some way, you? Sometimes I think about that when I'm sitting quietly, maybe with a cup of tea, watching the sunlight move across the floor. The thought comes softly. What if everything I'm seeing, everything I'm feeling, is not happening to me but through me? What if I'm not a separate being walking through life, but life itself walking through form? The Buddha once said that trying to find the first beginning of life is like looking for the start of a circle. You'll never find it, because the circle has no edge. And maybe that's a good thing, because when you stop looking for the beginning, you start living in the middle, with awareness, with gratitude, with peace. It's okay not to know how it all started. Really it is. Maybe that's not what we're meant to figure out. Maybe the point isn't to understand the mystery. It's to fall in love with it. To look at this world, fragile and beautiful, and say, even if I never know where I came from, I'm grateful to be here. That simple gratitude can change everything. It turns confusion into wonder, and wonder into wisdom. And if you're listening right now, maybe you feel that too, a quiet pull towards stillness, a sense of remembering something you've always known. Maybe this is what awakening feels like. Not lightning or revelation, but a soft recognition that we've always been part of something infinite, that every breath, every heartbeat is proof of belonging. So, as you listen to this, just breathe for a moment. Feel the air enter your lungs, then leave again. That breath connects you to every living thing. It's the same breath that's been moving through this world for ages, shared by all who lived before you and all who will come after. You are not alone in this. You never were. And if this way of seeing life brings you even a little peace, I'd love for you to stay with me here. Subscribe if you haven't yet, not as a click or a number, but as a quiet promise. A promise to keep walking together through these reflections, gently and with an open heart. Because the truth is, none of us really knows where we come from. But maybe together, we can learn how to truly be here. And that might just be the beginning we've been looking for all along. You know, the more I think about it, the more I realize that maybe the question, where do we come from, isn't just about finding an answer. It's about learning to listen. Because deep down, life has been whispering that answer all along, in ways too quiet for the mind to hear, but clear enough for the heart to feel. The Buddha never tried to give people a single, perfect explanation. Instead, he wanted us to look at the patterns, to see how everything moves, rises, fades, and begins again. It's all connected. This body, this earth, this breath. Nothing stands alone. Nothing ever really disappears. He once compared life to a flame being passed from one candle to another. The fire moves on, but it's never exactly the same, never completely different either. That's how we exist, carrying forward the light of countless lives, moments, and choices. Maybe that's why we sometimes feel drawn to things we don't understand, places that feel strangely familiar, or people who seem like we've known them forever. Maybe it's life recognizing itself through us, memory echoing softly through time. But here's the thing the Buddha understood so deeply. Knowing where we come from isn't as important as understanding how we continue. Every thought you hold, every word you speak, every action you take, that's how life flows through you into the world. You're not just living your story. You're shaping the next one. And the energy you release, kindness, love, anger, fear, doesn't vanish when you're done. It moves forward, creating ripples that touch everything and everyone, even in ways you'll never see. Maybe that's why the Buddha taught compassion above all else. Because if everything is connected, then every act of gentleness matters. Every time you choose understanding instead of judgment, patience instead of frustration, you help lighten the whole web of life. It's not about being holy or perfect. It's about being human in the truest, kindest way possible. And maybe that's what makes this teaching so timeless. You don't have to believe in anything supernatural to feel it. You can see it in how your kindness changes a person's day, or how your peace calms a room, or how your love lingers long after you've left. Sometimes we forget that. We think we're too small, too ordinary to make a difference. But look closer. Even a single drop changes the surface of the water. Every smile, every act of forgiveness, every moment of awareness, it all matters. The Buddha once said, "The mind is everything. What you think, you become." And maybe that's the real story of where we come from. We come from what we carry in our hearts. So, maybe we don't need to know who created the world or when it began. Maybe what matters is how we create it. Right here, through our choices, our presence, our care. The world isn't something happening to us. It's something happening through us. And when we start living with that awareness, everything changes. The noise softens. The rush slows down. Life starts to feel more like a gentle conversation than a race. If you're still listening, I want to thank you for giving yourself this quiet moment in a world that moves too fast. Taking the time to reflect like this is a form of love for yourself, for others, for life itself. And if these reflections speak to something inside you, I'd love for you to stay a little longer. Subscribe if you haven't yet, not out of habit, but as a simple way of saying, yes, I want to keep growing, keep remembering, keep walking this path with presence. Because maybe the answer we've been searching for isn't hiding in the past. It's here, in this breath, in this moment, in the quiet knowing that we've always belonged. And maybe that's where we truly come from. You know, sometimes I think the reason we search so hard for where we come from is because deep down, we just want to feel at home. We want to believe there's a place or a purpose that makes sense of everything. The Buddha understood that longing, but instead of pointing us to the stars or some faraway heaven, he turned our gaze inward. He said that home isn't somewhere we return to. It's something we remember. It's that still, quiet space inside us that's always been there, beneath all the noise and the questions. He once said that when we truly see ourselves, we see the whole universe. That might sound poetic, but maybe it's not meant to be understood with logic. Maybe it's meant to be felt. Because when you look deeply at your own life, your joys, your mistakes, your fears, you begin to see that everything you experience mirrors the rhythm of life itself. You are born, you grow, you change, you let go, and then somehow you begin again. Just like the trees that lose their leaves and bloom again in spring. Just like the tides that rise and fall without end. You are part of that same endless breathing of existence. The Buddha didn't ask us to erase our questions. He simply invited us to rest with them, to see that even the desire to know is part of what makes us human. And maybe that's enough. Maybe we don't need to solve the mystery to live peacefully inside it. When we let go of needing a final answer, we open ourselves to wonder, and wonder is what softens a heart. It's what turns fear into curiosity, and curiosity into compassion. There's a quiet beauty in realizing that every moment of your life, every laugh, every loss, every act of kindness is part of a long, unbroken story that began long before you and will continue long after. You don't have to hold the whole story to live it well. You just have to live this part with awareness. And maybe that's the greatest gift the Buddha gave. Not a map of where we came from, but a lantern to help us walk where we are. So the next time you look at the sky and feel small, remember this. You are not a tiny thing lost in a vast universe. You are the universe, expressing itself for a brief, precious moment as you. Every cell in your body carries a memory of stars. Every breath you take carries the echo of the first winds that ever blew across this earth. You've never been separate from it. You've just been learning to remember. And maybe that remembering, that soft, slow awakening, is the whole point. Because when you truly see that everything is connected, you start to live differently. You speak a little gentler. You forgive a little faster. You hold life with both hands, knowing how fragile and sacred it is. That's when compassion stops being something you try to practice and becomes something that naturally flows from you, like light from the sun. So if this reflection has touched something in you, stay here a while. Take a breath. Feel how alive you are right now. And if you'd like to keep walking this path with me, these quiet moments of thought and stillness, subscribe to this channel, not for the numbers, but as a shared promise to keep exploring the wonder of being human together. Because maybe in the end, we'll never fully know where we come from. But if we can learn to live with love, to meet the mystery with open eyes and an open heart, maybe that's the same as finding our way home. You know, sometimes I wonder if the real question isn't where do we come from, but rather what we do with the time we've been given. The Buddha often reminded his followers that being born human is rare. So rare that he compared it to a blind turtle swimming in an endless ocean, surfacing once every 100 years, and by pure chance slipping its head through a floating ring. That's how precious this life is. And when you really let that sink in, it changes everything. Because if this moment, this breath, this body are such rare gifts, then maybe the purpose of our being here isn't to solve the mystery of beginnings, but to live deeply in what's right here. To use our days to grow in kindness, to see clearly and to love fully. The Buddha didn't promise us eternal answers. He gave us the tools to make this fleeting moment meaningful. And that's the quiet miracle, isn't it? The fact that we don't have to wait for the next life or some perfect future to wake up. We can do it right here, while folding the laundry, watching the sunset, or holding someone's trembling hand. Enlightenment, he said, isn't somewhere far away. It's found in the simplicity of awareness, in the way we breathe through our pain and learn to see beauty even in what hurts. I remember once meeting an old man who had lost everything, his job, his health, even his home. Yet when I asked how he managed to stay calm, he smiled and said, "I stopped trying to own things I was only meant to borrow." That hit me deeply. Maybe that's what the Buddha meant by freedom. Not running from life, but understanding that everything in it is temporary, including our suffering. And once we stop clinging so tightly, peace starts to bloom naturally, like a flower opening after the rain. So, what if instead of chasing the answers to ancient cosmic questions, we ask smaller ones? Like, am I living today with kindness? Did I listen when someone needed to be heard? Did I forgive myself for being human? Because maybe that's where the real understanding begins, not in the stars, but in the heart. The Buddha's teaching on origins wasn't meant to fill our mind with theories. It was meant to open our hearts. He wanted us to see that the past, present, and future are woven together through our choices. Every thought, every word, every action is like a seed dropped into the soil of time. Someday it blooms, sometimes in joy, sometimes in sorrow, but always in accordance with what we planted. That's karma, not as punishment, but as participation. You're part of a living, breathing web that responds to you. And here's the beautiful part. You can change a pattern anytime. Even if you've made mistakes, even if you've been lost for years, you can begin again. The Buddha said, "Each morning we are born again. What we do today is what matters most." Isn't that comforting? You don't have to carry your past like a chain. You can carry it like a teacher. So maybe tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself, not where do I come from, but how can I return to kindness? Because every time you choose love over fear, patience over anger, or gratitude over resentment, you are remembering your true origin. You are returning home. And if these words whisper something familiar to your heart, stay a little longer. Subscribe if you like, not a habit, but as a quiet way of saying, yes, I want to keep walking toward peace. We're just travelers, you and I, sharing this little piece of eternity together. Maybe we'll never know all the answers, but we can live the questions beautifully. And that, perhaps, is enough. There's a quiet truth the Buddha shared that always stays with me. That understanding where we come from doesn't really matter if we don't understand how to live while we're here. He wasn't dismissing curiosity or the search for meaning. He was guiding us toward what truly heals. Because what good is knowing the beginning of the world if we still wake up angry, lonely, or lost in fear? What good is knowing how the stars were born if we don't know how to forgive or how to love? He said that the real purpose of knowing our origins is to free the heart, to see how everything that exists is woven together, how each action, no matter how small, ripples through this vast universe. That's why understanding karma isn't about judgment. It's about realizing we're all part of one great, ongoing story. Every word we speak, every thought we hold, every act of compassion or cruelty, each becomes a thread that shapes not only our own lives, but the world around us. I once met a woman who spent her whole life chasing answers, books, teachers, pilgrimages, anything that could tell her where the soul comes from. One day, after years of searching, she sat quietly under a tree and watched the leaves move in the wind. She told me that in that moment, something in her softened. She didn't find an answer, but she felt, maybe for the first time, that she belonged. That she didn't have to understand the beginning to feel at home in the present. Maybe that's what the Buddha meant. That true understanding isn't about collecting ideas. It's about dissolving the walls between ourselves and life. It's about recognizing that we've never been separate from a universe we're trying to explain. We're not observers of creation. We are creation. The same breath that moves through the stars moves through your chest right now. The same silence that cradles galaxies is holding your heart this very second. When you start to see life that way, everything changes. The way you speak, the way you treat others, even the way you see yourself, it all softens. You start to realize that being human isn't about perfection. It's about participation. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to be here fully, honestly, kindly. Maybe that's the real origin story the Buddha wanted us to remember, that we come from awareness, from love, from something vast that keeps expressing itself through us again and again. So, if tonight you're feeling small or uncertain about your place in the world, just breathe. You don't need to chase meaning. It's already inside you. The same light that gave birth to the stars shines quietly in your chest. The same rhythm that moves the ocean beats within your heart. You are part of something infinite, and that alone is enough. And if you found comfort in these words, stay with me here. Let's keep walking together through these gentle reflections. Subscribe if you like, not because it's expected, but because it's a way of saying, yes, I want to keep remembering. We'll keep exploring life one soft breath at a time, learning not just where we came from, but how to live beautifully while we're here. Because in the end, maybe that's the only real question that matters. Not where we began, but how much love we can bring into this moment, right now. Sometimes I think the Buddha wasn't trying to give us answers at all. He was trying to give us peace. He saw that our minds are always reaching, always asking why and how and when, as if one perfect explanation could finally quiet the noise inside us. But maybe peace doesn't come from knowing. It comes from allowing life to be a mystery, allowing our hearts to rest even when the mind can't find clarity. He taught that clinging to questions is just another form of attachment. We hold on to the idea that if we can understand everything, we'll finally feel safe. But the truth is, life has never promised a certainty. What it offers instead is presence, this moment, this breath, this gentle chance to open our hearts again. Maybe that's enough. Maybe it's always been enough. You see, when we stop demanding that the world makes sense, something beautiful happens. The air feels softer. The colors seem deeper. The people around us become more real. We start noticing the way light moves through the trees, or how laughter can fill a room like sunlight. It's as if the whole world starts whispering, "You don't have to figure me out, just be here with me." And maybe that's what awakening really is. Not a flash of divine knowledge, but a quiet surrender to what's already true. You and I, we don't have to chase enlightenment. We don't have to have the perfect meditation practice or read every sacred text. Sometimes, awakening is as simple as watching your breath move in and out, realizing that even in your confusion, you're already part of something sacred. I think the Buddha knew that once we stopped trying to understand where we came from, we start to feel instead. We start to feel that connection to the earth, to each other, to every living thing. It's not an idea. It's an experience, a pulse of quiet belonging that beats beneath every thought. So tonight, if you're sitting there wondering what your purpose is, or why things turn out the way they did, maybe let the questions rest for a while. Breathe in. Feel your body rise. Breathe out. Feel it fall in that simple rhythm. You're touching the same life that moves through all of us. You came from that. You are that. And if you ever forget, come back here. We'll keep walking together through the soft corners of the mind, reminding each other that peace isn't found by solving the mystery of life. It's found by living it. If these words touch something quiet in you, maybe subscribe. Stay close. Not because you need another voice to follow, but because sometimes it's nice to have a space where you can just breathe, remember, and feel human again. There's a story I love to imagine. A story not about God or heavens, but about a single breath. The Buddha once said that all of life can be found in one mindful breath. Think about that for a moment. Just breathing softly, without trying to go anywhere or be anything else. In that breath, you can feel where you came from, who you are, and where you're going all at once. Maybe that's the quiet miracle we've been overlooking. We keep searching for something grand, something cosmic, but life keeps whispering. It's right here in your chest, rising and falling. When you understand that, something inside you begins to loosen. You stop needing every answer. You stop fighting to control the path. You begin to see that everything, joy, sorrow, love, loss, is part of the same rhythm. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is separate. Even your pain, even your confusion, belongs. Maybe that's what it means to return home, not to a place, but to a way of seeing. To look at life not as a puzzle to solve, but as a river to float with, gently and gratefully. And as you do, you start noticing beauty in the simplest things. The sound of the wind becomes a prayer. The way sunlight hits the wall feels like a blessing. The warmth of someone's smile becomes proof that love is still here, still alive. You begin to understand that enlightenment isn't about escaping this world. It's about falling deeply, tenderly, completely in love with it. So maybe we don't need to ask anymore, where do humans come from? Maybe the better question is, how can we live in a way that honors where we are? Because this moment, this very breath, is a doorway. Every time you stop and truly feel it, you're touching something eternal. If you've been here listening, breathing with me through these reflections, I want to say thank you. You didn't come here by accident. Maybe some quiet part of you just needed to hear that you're enough, that you belong, that you don't have to chase peace. It's already inside you. And if these words have brought you even a small moment of stillness, maybe stay with me. Subscribe if it feels right. Not as a habit, but as a quiet promise to keep walking together toward calm, understanding, and love. Because in the end, no matter where we believe we come from, what truly matters is how we live right now, with kindness, with patience, with a gentle courage to keep opening our hearts again and again. Maybe that's all the Buddha ever wanted for us, to remember that this breath, this life, this moment is already sacred.